Imagine a weapon so dangerous that an empire survived 1,000 years partly because of it. Now imagine that same empire guarded its secret so well that when the empire finally collapsed, the weapon collapsed with it. Nobody wrote down the full formula. Nobody passed it on. And today, with every modern chemistry lab on the planet, scientists still cannot fully recreate it. You're about to learn about a substance that burned on top of water. Not beside it, not near it. On it, like the sea itself had caught fire. Sit with that for a second. Fire that water couldn't stop. This is the story of Greek fire. Picture Constantinople in the year 678. The city is surrounded. Arab fleets are closing in from the sea, and everyone inside the walls knows what a siege usually means. Except this time, something happens that nobody in that fleet has ever seen before. Byzantine ships glide forward. From tubes mounted on their bows, they release a stream of liquid flame. It doesn't just burn the enemy ships, it clings. It spreads across the surface of the sea itself, chasing sailors who jump overboard to escape it. Water, the one thing every sailor trusts to save them, becomes fuel. The attacking fleet breaks. Ships flee in panic. Constantinople survives, and just like that, an empire that should have fallen keeps standing for centuries longer than it had any right to. You'd think a weapon this powerful would spread, get copied, end up in history books with a clear recipe, the way gunpowder did centuries later. It didn't. The historian John Halden, who has spent decades at Princeton studying the Byzantine Empire, points out something strange about Greek fire. It wasn't just a weapon. It was treated like a state secret on the level of nuclear codes today. One Byzantine emperor is recorded as saying that only 3 things must never fall into foreign hands: the imperial crown jewels, a royal princess for marriage, and the formula for Greek fire. Notice the order. The formula was ranked alongside royal bloodlines and the empire's most sacred treasures. Who actually invented it? A man named Kallinikos, a Greek engineer who fled to Constantinople from Syria sometime around 668. He brought with him knowledge the empire needed, and the empire never let it leave again. His descendants, according to some sources, were the only family trusted to know the complete process, generation after generation, whispered forward like a bloodline secret rather than written into any surviving manual. Here's where it gets stranger. Byzantine sources describe the weapon in enough detail to know roughly how it was deployed, but almost nothing about what it actually contained. Historians know there was some kind of bronze pump, a heating chamber, a nozzle that could rotate like a modern hose. The chemist James Partington, who spent years combing through medieval texts trying to solve this exact riddle, found dozens of theories floating through history: naphtha, sulfur, quicklime, pine resin, saltpeter. Different sources point in different directions and none of them fully agree. Why does that matter? Because it means even the people copying down the sources at the time may not have fully understood what they were describing. The operators knew the process, the scribes only knew the results, and the results were terrifying enough to write about. One account describes Bulgar forces capturing an entire intact Greek fire apparatus, tubes, pump, and fuel included. You'd expect that to be the moment the secret finally leaked. Instead, without the trained specialists who knew how to regulate the pressure, the temperature, and the timing, the captured equipment sat useless. They had the machine. They didn't have the knowledge inside the people who ran it. That's the detail that should stop you. This wasn't a recipe on a scroll somewhere waiting to be stolen. The real secret lived inside trained human hands: muscle memory, timing, technique passed only through direct apprenticeship. Steal the hardware and you still walk away with nothing. So what happened to it? Slowly, across centuries, the specialists died. The empire that guarded the secret fractured. Constantinople, weakened by crusades, internal wars, and shrinking territory, lost the resources and stability needed to maintain a weapons program built entirely on secrecy rather than written instruction. By the time the Byzantine Empire finally fell in 1453, Greek fire had already faded from active use for hundreds of years. The knowledge simply had nowhere left to go. Now here's where modern science enters the story, and where things get genuinely strange. In 2006, John Halden decided to stop theorizing and actually build the thing. Working from fragmentary Byzantine descriptions, he and his team constructed a full-scale replica of the delivery apparatus, using period-plausible materials and oil sourced from the Crimean region, the same general area Byzantine engineers likely used. They lit it. Flames shot 10 to 15 meters, powerful enough to incinerate anything in their path within seconds. It worked. The physical mechanism, the pump, the heating chamber, the swiveling nozzle, functioned exactly as the old texts implied it should. But here's the piece that never got solved. Halden's team could replicate the machine. They could not replicate the fuel with full confidence. Petroleum-based mixtures come close. They burn. They're dangerous. But none of the modern reconstructions have definitively reproduced the specific property that terrified medieval witnesses most: fire that kept burning while floating and spreading across open water, chasing swimmers instead of extinguishing. Modern chemists have theories involving quicklime reacting with water or specific distillation techniques that concentrated naphtha into something closer to napalm than raw crude oil. Some researchers argue the water burning effect was exaggerated exaggerated by terrified witnesses. Others argue it was real and simply used a mixture we haven't correctly identified yet. Either way, the honest answer from the people who've studied this longer than anyone else is this: nobody currently alive knows the exact formula. Not fully, not with certainty. Think about what that actually means. You live in an age where you can look up the ingredients for nuclear reactors, the blueprints for stealth aircraft, and the exact chemical structure of nerve agents developed by modern militaries. And yet, a weapon from over 1,000 years ago, built with medieval-era materials by people without any concept of modern chemistry, still holds a piece of its secret that has outlasted the empire, the language it was recorded in, and every attempt at reconstruction since. An empire fell, a language changed, entire civilizations rose and collapsed in the centuries since, and the formula is still gone. That should feel unsettling, and it should also change something in how you think about knowledge itself. You live in a world obsessed with documentation. Everything gets recorded, backed up, archived, searchable. It feels almost impossible for something important to simply vanish. But Greek fire is proof that knowledge doesn't survive because it's important. It survives because someone chooses to pass it on, in a form other people can actually access. The Byzantines protected their weapons so completely that they accidentally destroyed it. Their secrecy worked exactly as designed, right up until there was no one left to keep the secret. What they thought was their greatest strength turned out to be the very reason it disappeared. You probably don't think about how fragile knowledge really is. Passwords get backed up, documents get cloud storage, skills get written into manuals. But somewhere in your own life, there's likely a piece of knowledge sitting in exactly one person's head. A technique, a family process, a way of doing something that nobody has bothered to write down because it feels obvious now. It won't feel obvious once that person is gone. That's the real weapon here. Not the fire, the forgetting. Somewhere in the ashes of an empire that no longer exists, a formula that could burn on water still sits unrecovered. Not because it was too complicated to write down, but because the people who built it never believed they needed to. You're about to learn about a weapon so powerful it saved an empire for centuries. What you actually learned is how easily even the most protected knowledge in human history can disappear completely, taking a piece of the past with it forever.